Welcome to the Explainer. So, did you know that Michigan has over 11,000 inland lakes and borders 4 of the Great Lakes? I mean, it is an absolute boater's paradise. But hey, before you launch off the dock and feel the wind in your hair, we've got to navigate Michigan's maritime laws. Getting your paperwork straight isn't just about avoiding some annoying fine. It's actually how the state funds vital environmental conservation and maintains public safety across all those beautiful waters. So, let's dive right in.
To kick things off, let's look at a very common and honestly surprisingly confusing scenario. You might be wondering, does your kayak need to be registered in Michigan? You'd probably think the answer is a simple no, right? Well, it actually depends entirely on how you power it.
And here's the catch. If you add a motor, even a tiny electric trolling motor, the answer is absolutely yes. What's really wild here is that Michigan law literally doesn't care about minimum horsepower. If your kayak or canoe is exclusively human-powered, you're totally exempt. But the second you strap even a 30-pound thrust battery-powered motor to it, boom, it legally becomes a motorized vessel, and that triggers mandatory registration.
To get you on the water legally and without a massive headache, I'm going to act as your digital dockmaster today. Here is our 6-step roadmap. We're covering Do I Need to Register?, the step-by-step registration process, fees, taxes, and renewals, marking your boat properly, missing paperwork and pitfalls, and finally, resources and final steps. All right, step 1. Do I actually need to register this thing? Let's figure out if your vessel requires state paperwork. So, here is the clear dividing line between what requires a trip to the Secretary of State and what doesn't. On one side, we've got our exempt vessels, your standard paddle-only kayaks, non-motorized canoes, and privately owned rowboats under 16 feet. On the other side are mandatory registrations, absolutely any motorized boat, personal watercraft like jet skis, and interestingly enough, non-motorized sailboats of any length. Oh, and keep in mind, if you start using that exempt hand-powered kayak for a commercial rental business, yep, it suddenly crosses over and must be registered. Now, people often confuse registration with titling. It happens all the time. But the crucial point is that they're two totally distinct legal concepts. Registration gives you permission to physically operate on the water. A title, on the other hand, is your definitive legal proof of ownership. You only must have a title if your boat is 20 feet or longer, or if it has a permanently affixed engine, like an inboard motor, regardless of the boat's length. If you just have a standard 16-foot aluminum fishing boat with a detachable outboard, you don't need a title. Your registration or bill of sale is all the proof of ownership you need.
Moving right along to Section 2, the step-by-step registration process. Let's navigate that Secretary of State workflow.
We can break down this initial registration process into 3 really simple, actionable steps. First, gather your documents, mainly your valid ID and your proof of ownership. Second, be prepared to pay a 6% use tax if it's a private sale. And third, visit a Secretary of State branch. Now, it's super important to note that while your future renewals can often be done online, initial registrations and title transfers almost always require an in-person visit. They just need to verify your original physical documents to prevent fraud. Let's clarify that first step a bit more. What exactly counts as proof of ownership? Well, the state is very specific. If you bought a brand new boat from a dealer, it's the manufacturer's certificate of origin. If you bought a used boat that requires a title, it's the original title, signed over perfectly by the seller. But what if it's a non-title boat? In that case, you're going to need a highly detailed bill of sale. And no, this can't just be a quick note scribbled on a napkin. It has to explicitly list the vessel's year, make, length, hull identification number, purchase price, and the full names, addresses, and signatures of both the buyer and the seller. Which brings us to Section 3, fees, taxes, and renewals. Let's unpack the financial obligations. So how much is this whole thing going to cost? Registration in Michigan actually operates on a 3-year cycle, expiring on March 31st of your 3rd year. The fees just scale with the size and type of your vessel. For example, a small motorboat under 12 feet is a mere $14 for the full 3 years. Pretty great, right? A pontoon boat, regardless of its size, is a flat $23. But if you have a larger motorboat between 21 and 28 feet, that jumps up to $115. Now, here is a massive financial benefit for Michigan boaters. Paying this fee entirely exempts your vessel from annual personal property taxes. That literally saves you a ton of money compared to what you'd pay in some neighboring states. But wait, there are taxes too.
In private, peer-to-peer sales, the buyer has to pay a flat 6% use tax to the Secretary of State. This is calculated based on the purchase price or the fair market value, whichever is higher. However, you definitely want to note the specific family exemptions here. Immediate family transfers, like selling a boat to your spouse, parent, child, or sibling, are completely exempt from this 6% tax. Just a quick word of caution, though. Transferring your boat to a family-owned legal entity, like an LLC or a family trust, does not qualify for this tax-free exemption.
All right, Section 4, marking your boat properly. This is all about how you physically display your legal status on the water.
To make this incredibly easy to remember, just anchor the marking rules in your mind with the number 3. Your assigned MC registration numbers must be exactly 3-inch block letters, and your colorful validation decal goes exactly 3 inches to the right of those numbers.
Let's detail those strict formatting requirements real quick. The state demands plain vertical block font, so no fancy cursive, italicized, or stylized lettering allowed. The color of your numbers must contrast sharply with your hull. Use black letters on a white boat or white letters on a dark boat. They have to read left to right on the forward half of the bow on both the port and starboard sides, and, importantly, you have to use a hyphen or a space to separate the letters from the numbers. You might be wondering, why are they so strict about this? Because Marine Patrol officers need to clearly read your MC numbers and spot that color-coded expiration decal from a distance.
Let's pivot to Section 5, missing paperwork and pitfalls. Time to troubleshoot those common registration roadblocks.
Look, we've all been there, or we know someone who has. You buy an old aluminum boat from a neighbor, or you want to register a little dinghy that's just been sitting at the family cabin for decades and, oops, you realize you have absolutely zero paperwork. Lost the title? Missing the bill of sale for a legacy vessel? It is super frustrating, I know. But take a breath, because there are solutions.
Michigan actually provides exact administrative workarounds based on the fair market value of the vessel. If the boat is valued at $2,500 or less, you can use the self-certification procedure. This basically involves a sworn statement explaining how you acquired it, along with photos of the hull identification number. But if the boat requires a title and is valued at over $2,500, you have to use the surety bond pathway. Now, this is a bigger hurdle. You have to get a formal appraisal, purchase a 3-year surety bond for exactly twice the boat's value, and have a law enforcement officer physically inspect the hull ID. Yeah, it takes extra effort, but it completely prevents a missing title from becoming a total roadblock.
And hey, here is a massive pitfall alert. Please do not overlook the trailer. While boats get a 3-year registration, boat trailers in Michigan require a permanent license plate that lasts for the entire life of the trailer under your ownership. The cost of this plate is based on the trailer's empty weight. If you don't have an origin certificate showing that weight, you might literally have to tow that unregistered trailer to a certified commercial scale, like at a truck stop or a scrapyard, just to get a printed weight receipt for the Secretary of State. Okay, we are in the home stretch. Section 6, Resources and Final Steps, Staying Compliant and Finally Hitting the Water.
Just a quick rundown of your final operational rules. First, you absolutely must keep your 3-year registration certificate on board the vessel at all times. Second, if you are ever involved in a severe maritime accident, state law requires you to report it within 48 hours. Third, depending on your berth year and the type of vessel you're operating, you likely need to obtain and carry a boating safety certificate, which basically acts as your boating license. And lastly, when your 3 years are finally up, make your life a whole lot easier and just renew online at michigan.gov/SOS.
Now, a quick professional heads up. Maritime rules, tax rates, and administrative procedures can, and definitely do, change over time. You should always verify the most current regulations and fee structures directly on official government websites, specifically the Secretary of State's portal, before finalizing any purchase or submitting your paperwork.
So, you've conquered the paperwork, you've paid the fees, and your decals are perfectly spaced out on the bow. But the real question is, are you ready to safely navigate the Great Lakes? Getting registered is just step 1 of being a responsible captain. Education and safety are what truly make a great boater. If you found this explainer helpful for untangling Michigan's maritime laws, please share it with your fellow boaters. And be sure to check the description for further safety resources and links to the official forms. Thanks so much for learning with us, stay safe out there, and enjoy the water.